I think connectivity is absolutely key, and you're right. It's a big deterrent for taking transit if you don't know how you're going to get that last mile, the last 2 miles, or where you're going to switch to another mode. And that is a big focus of both the programs that Undersecretary Annis is going to talk about. We have, as eligible projects, we're looking for those connectivity projects, operational improvements, so that you can seamlessly transfer between systems, that it's clear what you're supposed to do. I mean, I really think this is a big deterrent from taking transit if you don't know how, literally what you're going to do. It's you do your default. Oh, I'm going to drive. It's easier. I know what I'm doing, usually. So I think that those connectivity project, first mile, last mile, and also it's the walking and biking to transit is key as well. I mean, even if it's half a mile away, if there's not a safe way to get there, and you can't see the transit agent, you don't know exactly where it is, or what you have to cross to get there. That's a big deterrent, and that's where our active transportation program, and also the Strategic Growth Council's Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities program is looking at investing in land use projects that also include connectivity to transit.
Okay. Okay. At some point, I'd like to see that third scenario you were telling me. That it sounds like a very bold change plan, right?
California Transportation Plan 2040 it's up there as a draft, and happy to do a specific briefing on that.
Yeah, that'd be a good thing to be briefed on. Okay, Senator Leno, you had some questions, Senator?
First of all, great to see you, and thank you both for your commitment to meeting our goals of AB 32 through transportation sectors. A couple of questions. First, you had mentioned in your presentation the California Enviro Screen. I imagine you've heard concerns that there are disadvantaged communities that, because of the vagaries or peculiarities of the screen, there are clearly disadvantaged communities. I think Richmond in the East Bay, Bayview Hunters Point in San Francisco are excluded. Is there continued focus on that?
Yes, so I think we did hear comments from you and others about areas that we missed, and in the refinement process before the release of version 2.0, we did go through and make sure that we were capturing as much statewide data as possible. We heard complaints about missing the border region as well, and we went back and corrected some errors and actually did draw in a portion of the Bayview Hunters Point area, portions of Richmond, and portions of the border that had been missed. Additionally, in drawing the line for investments at the 25% mark of disadvantaged communities, I think we wrapped in some of the communities of concern. However, a Cal Enviro Screen is a living document, it's a living process, and as more statewide data becomes available, it can be integrated into the tool. So as I mentioned, we released version 2.0. We had a 1.0. We workshopped, we heard concerns, we released the 2.0, and we're making investments based on that 2.0, but I think, as I said, as we hear about more statewide data availability, we'll be able to integrate it. The biggest challenge with some of the data is that it's available for certain areas of the state, but not across the state, and because Cal Enviro Screen covers all of California, we're limited somewhat by taking in piecemeal data. But we've heard the concerns, and we continue to be interested in hearing from others about areas that we may have missed.
Well, thank you for being receptive to the concerns expressed. It's really insult to injury for some of these communities which have for decades been the most disadvantaged, and now that there's some potential resources to be able to address some of the needs and mitigate some of the damage that has been done, that they're left outside. So I'm glad to hear you consider it to be a living document. And then as we consider the goal of, as the governor mentioned in his State of the State address, reducing our petroleum use in coming decades by 50%, our greater reliance on transit and bicycling, as well as greater fuel efficiencies, can you talk to us a little bit about our the declining value of our fuel taxes, and any thoughts you may have as to how we address the needs that in the past have been funded by those taxes, which are clearly not going to serve us in the future?
Well, I'll say that the Transportation Agency is clearly thinking about this, because that was a discussion that we had right after the State of the State came out. So, Kate, if you want to.
Yeah, DeSaulnier introduced a bill last year, the governor signed, that really looked at what can we do to start to replace the gas tax, which you're right. It's great that fuels are getting more efficient and cars are more efficient, but it does mean that the gas tax is actually decreasing. And so we're in full exploration mode of what's next.
Yeah, there's a committee that I happen to be a member of, and their report deadline is June 30th, 2018, to report to the legislature about a proposal for replacing the fuel tax with some kind of vehicle mileage fee-based kind of thing, but they left it pretty open. So there's a lot of complicated issues. Privacy is one of them, you know, how you're going to do it, what kind of IT kind of thing you're going to do with it, et cetera, et cetera. So more to be discovered.
So mum's the word for now.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, other senators have questions. Senator Cannella.
Ms. White, so you talked about this third scenario, which frankly terrifies me. I don't know how that's going to work. If you're in a very urban area, I'm sure it works great, right? If you're going to jump on the bus and go 3 blocks, that makes a lot of sense. But a lot of folks in my district, very rural district, and a lot of the good paying jobs are in the Bay Area. So the Bay Area has a lot of businesses, not a lot of housing. We have a lot of housing, not a lot of businesses. And so my folks drive over to the Bay Area, usually a 2-hour commute one way. So how are you trying to juggle the realities of folks who live in rural areas when you come up with these very academic studies?
Well, the idea is not just academic. The idea is that it is actually laying out a vision for the transformation of the transportation sector to support your constituency as well as the whole constituency of California. So it's looking at, well, what are all the different strategies at every level? So there's actually some great studies on local, on rural communities, smaller communities that have been successful, and it's certainly for local trips, which is the majority of trips are local. Commuting is one thing, but a lot of people, you know, drop off, pick up from school, errands is actually the majority of trips now. It's about 60% of trips. And so being able to replace some of those trips with being able to, you know, for a family to be able to walk, even in a, you know, a small town, be able to walk within, you know, a half a mile to what they need, or take, you know, a much shorter trip. So those are some of the solutions for rural communities. And then in terms of getting to work, we're really looking for much serious investment in interregional rail, so that people have not only high-speed rail, but local, you know, commuter rail and interregional rail throughout the state to be able to get to work from, you know, somewhere in the Central Valley to the Bay Area, or, you know, Bakersfield to Los Angeles.
We would certainly welcome investment in rail. In my part of the district, ACE train specifically can be extended from its terminus point now over to Merced, very expensive. But we have, again, a very, very poor community for the most part, and we do need dollars to be invested in that. So now you talk about, you know, walking and biking, which I love to do both of those. All 4 of my children go to school within a couple of miles of our house. The problem that we face in rural areas, though, is we don't have sidewalks. So we don't really have safe routes to schools. And so if we have our kids walk to school, it's on the shoulder, it's in the dirt, you know, it's not very safe. But there's been a real resistance to fund safe routes to school. So, I mean, if we've got, looks like this last auction was about $630 million for cap and trade, there should be a priority set on funding those safe routes to schools if we're going to radically change the way that we live now. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think you know, school trips are absolutely key, and it's a huge amount of traffic is generated from, you know, school pickup and drop off.
It's inconsistent to say we're going to, and I'm looking forward to seeing this third scenario. But if we're going to try to change the way people live, which, you know, we have very aggressive goals in California, so I'm not going to litigate that. But if we're going to try to change the way people live their lives, we should also fund the things that make it possible to do that. And when we're not funding those basic things, that's concerning. So one last question. There was a study done, and I can get you that study that shows if we resurface our roads, we could see a 2 to 3% reduction in greenhouse gases, good roads versus bad roads, makes sense, right? Yeah. Is there any talk about, I know Senator Bell and I are talking a lot about transportation, but from an administration standpoint, have you looked at those studies? Do you agree? And do you think that's a worthwhile project to fund?
A major priority of Secretary Kelly's for the transportation sector is a fix-it-first approach, and repaving is absolutely key to that. And so we're looking at what are the best ways to spend our limited dollars, but in the SHOP program at Caltrans is for operations and maintenance. It's about $2.3 billion a year. So making sure that we spend it on pavement improvements where it makes the most sense.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cannell. Other senators, Senator Roth?
In reducing greenhouse gas emissions and driving folks away from reliance on fossil fuels and considering bills to, increase the requirements and this and that, aren't we really putting the cart before the horse if we don't figure out how to fund transportation improvements at the same time?
Well, I think we are.
Is that a fair question?
We are funding.
I think we're doing both.
Yeah, I talked about some of the programs that we're funding, and then Undersecretary Annis will talk more about the new transit programs under Cap-and-Trade.
Yeah, I think we're trying to address both. So address existing policies now and also look to expand those existing policies or develop new policies that will allow us to take a leap forward.
Well, I apologize for missing. I apparently missed that portion of the presentation, so I will now shut my mouth and
We're happy
catch
to
up.
provide, and more detail will come out for the rest of the day. Yeah.
Other senators? Senator Bates?
Yes, I have a concern regarding the collaboration that might be going on with our transportation division and then our energy producers, ensuring that our technology is going to be in line with those goals. Specifically, the range issue with electric vehicles is certainly an issue for my district. A lot of people are driving Teslas in affluent South Orange County, but the range issue is a big one as if we have the opportunity to make that whole technology more affordable. So if we're not working together, collaborating with the technology industry, the energy industry on ensuring that that is going to be a viable alternative, we aren't going to meet the goal in terms of the the percentage we're trying to achieve with the electric vehicle. And it is something that is coming on board with the new developments in my area where they're going to have the neighborhood electric vehicles approved. So are we in silos or are we collaborating as we go forward?
I think we can probably both address this, but I think also later you'll hear from Commissioner Janaea Scott and Richard Corey about the different ways that our policies are actually spurring investments in these areas in the private sector. Mm-hmm. So I think we're trying to make sure that, yes, we're working together in concert so that we're both funding areas of research and investing in policies that will actually allow these companies to expand their range and to think about new investments there as well. It's a careful marriage between policy and industry response, and I think it's one that we're constantly working on in our agencies.
Okay. Other senators, thank you. Thank you very much for the two secretaries. Did a great job. Okay, let's bring up the second panel. It's more of the meat and potatoes, if you want to say it that way, or corned beef and cabbage part of the presentation. For reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the transportation sector. We have Richard Corey, good to see you, Richard, from Air Resources Board, Janaea Scott from our California Energy Commissioner, and Brian Ennis is Undersecretary of California Transportation Agency. So I'll turn it over to Richard first. Is that okay?
You bet.
Okay, Richard, good to see you.
Thank you as well, and thank you, Chair Bell and Chair Wachowski and members of the committees. It's a pleasure to be here and have the opportunity to speak with you. California's transportation sector accounts for about half of the state's greenhouse gas emissions when you consider emissions from the production and use of transportation fuels. That point's been made. Transportation is also the primary source of smog forming and toxic air pollution. Comprehensive actions to reduce emissions from vehicles and fuels are a critical aspect of reaching the 2020 target established in AB 32 and will have significant co-benefits for air quality and public health. Policies to reduce emissions focus on three aspects of transportation: vehicles, fuels, and land use. Between 2010 and 2020, the state's vehicles, fuels, and land use policies account for about half the reductions needed to reach the 2020 target. Today, I'll provide an update on some of our key measures in the transportation sector, organized by these three focus areas. A more detailed description of ARB's transportation measures are included in the handout we provided to the committees. Starting with the state's policies to reduce emissions from vehicles today, cars and light-duty trucks are 99% cleaner, 99%, than they were in the 1970s. We're on track to meet our goal of 1.5 million zero-emission vehicles by 2025 and are investing in the infrastructure necessary to support a growing fleet of battery electric and fuel cell vehicles. In addition to reducing greenhouse gases, this means improvement in air quality, significant reductions in oil use, and avoided fuel costs for consumers. In 2012, ARB approved the Advanced Clean Cars program, developed through collaboration with the US EPA and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. This program lays the foundation for the next generation of ultra-clean vehicles. The program builds on the standards adopted pursuant to AB 1493 by Senator Pavley and includes more stringent greenhouse gas emission standards, tighter criteria pollutant standards, and increased production requirements for zero-emission vehicles. The program is designed to cut greenhouse gas emissions from new passenger vehicles in 2025 by half compared to today's vehicle mix. Because of the technology forcing nature of the standards and California's commitment to a national program, we're currently in the process of conducting a midterm review of the standards for model years 2022 to 2025 in collaboration with US EPA and NHTSA. The review will be used to inform whether ARB and the federal agencies maintain the standards as adopted or consider revising them. For heavy-duty trucks, in 2013, ARB approved Phase 1 greenhouse gas emission standards to align with the federal Phase 1 regulation adopted by US EPA in 2011. ARB's action provides nationwide consistency for engine and vehicle manufacturers and allows ARB to enforce the requirements. The Phase 1 standards set the stage for the next round of more stringent greenhouse gas standards, referred to as Phase 2, which President Obama called for a year ago and that US EPA and NHTSA will be proposing in the coming months. Recent technical analyses indicate that by 2025, the combined Phase 1 and Phase 2 programs could cut fuel consumption and greenhouse gas emissions by at least 40% compared to 2010 levels. Cleaning up the heavy-duty fleet in California will be necessary to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and meet federal air quality standards, and we'll be working with US EPA to ensure that this standard captures all available cost-effective opportunities to reduce emissions, increase efficiency, and save fuel. In addition to reducing emissions from vehicles, we also focus on fuels. California's low-carbon fuel standard targets fuels by requiring a reduction in the carbon intensity of transportation fuels by 10% in 2020. There's a range of clean fuels, which are already available today, that will enable us to meet this goal and push even further beyond 2020. Fuels like hydrogen, electricity, renewable natural gas and renewable diesel, and clean biofuels are already supplying California's market in response to the low-carbon fuel standard, and more projects are poised to come online in the future. This year, the board is considering a rulemaking to readopt the low-carbon fuel standard to address the procedural deficiencies in the original how the original regulation was adopted. We've been using this opportunity to enhance the regulation including incorporating a cost containment feature. In addition to our efforts in California, British Columbia has a low carbon fuel standard. The governor of Oregon just signed legislation to extend its low carbon fuel standard, and we're working with Washington in its efforts to adopt a similar program. These programs will further expand the market for clean, low carbon fuels. Finally, transportation fuels are covered in the cap and trade program starting this year, which puts all fuels on an equal footing relative to their carbon content. In addition to fuels and vehicles, we need to take a broader look at our transportation systems as a whole and make them more efficient, provide greater mobility options, and provide for greater growth and connectivity in the state. Under Senate Bill 375, progress is already being made to plan and implement more sustainable communities. In 2010, ARB approved per capita passenger vehicle greenhouse gas emission reduction targets for 2020 and 2035 for each of the 18 federally designated metropolitan planning organizations in California. The goal of SB 375 is to encourage regional planning that integrates land use and transportation in a way that reduces greenhouse gas emissions associated with driving passenger vehicles. This year, we're undertaking a process to update the greenhouse gas reduction targets for regions subject to SB 375. In addition to moving people more efficiently, we must take steps in California to optimize the way we move goods and freight within and through the state. As home to several major ports and hubs for international goods movement, we reap tremendous economic benefits from our goods movement system. Unfortunately, we also suffer from some significant environmental impacts that inefficient or dirty technologies can create. We can't accommodate needed growth in our goods movement system with the strategies and technologies of the past. To address this challenge, ARB is working with other state partners like the California Transportation Agency, as well as with local and regional partners to develop and implement a sustainable freight strategy. The Sustainable Freight Strategy is an integrated plan intended to identify strategies to transform the sector to zero-emission technologies. This is a major undertaking that will require a range of policy, regulatory, and incentive-based tools. ARB will release a draft document later this spring that will identify both regulatory and voluntary levers to reduce emissions and pave the way to a zero or near zero emission freight system. What do these measures mean for California's greenhouse gas reductions by 2020 and beyond? I'm pleased to report that we're on track to meet the 2020 target. Furthermore, these efforts will provide ongoing emission reduction benefits beyond 2020. Together, current programs are estimated to further reduce greenhouse gas emissions approximately 15% between 2020 and 2035. After 2035, however, without additional actions, greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector are projected to increase slightly as our state's population and economy grow through 2050. Thus, successfully achieving the state's 2050 greenhouse gas target of 80% below 1990 levels will continue to require further reductions from the transportation sector. These efforts will need to include a broad range of advanced technologies, cleaner fuels, and sustainable community land use strategies. The Phase 2 greenhouse gas standards for heavy-duty vehicles that I mentioned earlier, and the governor's goal to reduce petroleum consumption by up to 50% by 2030 will be critical for California to continue the momentum towards achieving the state's climate goals and to ensure attainment of federal ozone and particulate matter standards. I'll turn now to talk about the cap and trade auction proceeds. To date, ARB has held 10 successful auctions. Auction proceeds deposited in the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund have totaled about $1.6 billion. The investment of auction proceeds will further reduce greenhouse gas emissions in support of the state's AB 32 goals. This year, we'll see auction proceeds invested across a range of important programs that will benefit California's communities, including advancing our goals for the transportation sector. We're investing in incentives to support markets for the cleanest vehicles. We're supporting improved transit networks and enhanced mobility choices in local communities. And we're helping to bring the most advanced and cleanest heavy-duty vehicle technologies to market. These investments will deliver significant benefits to California's most disadvantaged communities. The $200 million appropriation that ARB received for low-carbon transportation in 2014-15 budget is being invested in a mix of projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions, benefit disadvantaged communities, promote the use of clean fuels and technologies, and support the market transition to zero and near zero emission vehicles. Given the need for steep reductions in air pollution to achieve federal and state air quality standards, it's important that our investments have benefits for both climate and air quality. This is a key principle underlying all our investment decisions. The second handout I provided describes how we allocated the $200 million for the 14-15 fiscal year. At least half of the $200 million will be directed towards benefiting disadvantaged communities, ensuring that we extend use of the cleanest vehicles and technologies in California's most impacted regions. Incentive funding is a critical tool for achieving emission reductions and complement the regulatory efforts that I described earlier. These funds will support the administration's goal to deploy 1.5 million zero-emission vehicles in California by 2025 and reduce petroleum consumption by up to 50% by 2030. We reached a key milestone in 2014 with the 100,000th ZEV, zero-emission vehicle, sold in California, due in no small part to these programs and the corresponding infrastructure support provided by the California Energy Commission. While implementing the 2014-15 funding plan, we're also in the process of developing the 2015-16 funding plan for the $200 million low-carbon transportation funds and the $23 million air quality improvement program funds in the governor's January budget proposal. We'll address the requirements of both SB 1275 and SB 1204 in this funding plan, which will be considered by our board on June 25th. SB 1275 establishes the climate, or rather the Charge Ahead California initiative, with the goals of placing 1 million zero and near zero emission vehicles in California by 2023 and increasing access to these vehicles by lower income consumers and consumers in disadvantaged communities. SB 1275 requires ARB to limit consumer eligibility for the CVRP program based on income, ensure that the program rebate levels can be phased down, and consider conversion to a point-of-sale model, and conduct various planning and technology assessment activities aimed at identifying the multi-year funding need, among other provisions. We'll propose income limits for the CVRP as part of this year's funding plan. We intend to workshop potential approaches to this later this month. SB 1275 acknowledges that the long-term planning and technology assessment will take some time and directs ARB to incorporate this into our 2016-17 funding plan. We have research underway to help inform this assessment. SB 1275 also directs ARB to establish projects to increase access to clean transportation for lower income consumers and disadvantaged communities. To that end, we're developing 4 projects that represent innovative new approaches to getting zero emission technologies into disadvantaged communities, and we're excited about the potential to increase access to cleaner technologies. These 4 projects include higher rebates for public fleets to purchase zero emission and plug-in hybrid light-duty vehicles that operate in and near disadvantaged communities. This project launched in February. Car sharing and mobility improvement projects to increase the use of plug-in hybrid and zero-emission vehicles in and benefiting disadvantaged communities. A competitive solicitation is open now and will award funding in May. Vehicle retirement and replacement, or Plus Up, which provides an additional incentive amount above the base incentive under the Enhanced Fleet Modernization Program, car scrappage program, for lower income consumers in and near disadvantaged communities who retire older dirtier cars and replace them with used or new hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or zero-emission vehicles. This will be initially piloted in the San Joaquin Valley and South Coast. We'll award funding to those two air districts later this spring. Financing assistance, such as loan loss guarantee or interest rate buy-down programs to help lower-income consumers purchase cleaner cars. This project is under development, and we expect to release a competitive solicitation within the next few months. While SB 1275 focuses on passenger vehicles, SB 1204 provides a framework for funding heavy-duty vehicle and equipment projects. SB 1204 creates the California Clean Truck, Bus, and Off-Road Vehicle and Equipment Technology Program to fund the development, demonstration, pre-commercial pilot, and early commercial deployment of zero and near zero emission technologies with the priority given to projects that benefit disadvantaged communities. SB 1204 establishes specific requirements related to how ARB prioritizes project categories and selects projects. It also directs ARB to prepare an annual framework and plan for implementing the program and articulating our overall vision for the investment in the vehicle and equipment technologies identified in the bill. We'll incorporate these elements in the upcoming funding plan. In addition to directly administering ARB's low-carbon transportation funds, ARB also works closely with other agencies that receive funding from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. For example, ARB is developing funding guidelines to ensure all projects reduce GHG emissions and further the purposes of AB 32. The guidelines will also establish fiscal procedures for state agencies that need to request withdrawals from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, provide guidance on how an agency can maximize benefits to disadvantaged communities, provide methods to quantify GHG reductions and co-benefits, and establish reporting, record-keeping, and accountability requirements. Last fall, ARB adopted interim guidance that applies to funds appropriated for the 14-15 fiscal year, and will adopt final guidelines that include all of the elements I just described this summer. ARB also consults with the California State Transportation Agency, Caltrans, and the Strategic Growth Council on the development of their programs that together help to achieve sustainable communities' goals, expand transit and active transportation, invest in cleaner and more efficient vehicles, and utilize low-carbon fuels. In closing, the key to addressing our climate, air quality, energy, and economic priorities in the transportation sector is to address each element of the system. That's what we're doing by requiring the cleanest vehicles and fuels, improving planning, supporting new technologies to improve system efficiencies, putting a price on carbon, and working to make our cities and towns more connected. Through these initiatives, I'm optimistic that together we can achieve the state's ambitious air quality and climate objectives. And I look forward to working with all of you and happy to answer any questions.